denies it. May God grant me the absolution which I would otherwise ask of his church. But whether I die on the instant, or half an hour hence, I equally beseech your grace for one moment's opportunity to speak that to royal person which highly concerns your fame as a Christian king." "Say on," said the king, making no doubt that he was about to hear some confession concerning the loss of the banner. "What I have to speak," said Sir Kenneth, "touches the royalty of England, and must be said to no ears but thine own." "Begone with yourselves, sirs," said the king to Neville and De Vaux. The first obeyed, but the latter would not stir from the king's presence. "If you said I was in the right," replied De Vaux to his sovereign, "I will be treated as one should be who hath been found to be right, that is, I will have my own will. I leave you not with this false Scot." "How, De Vaux!" said Richard angrily, and stamping slightly. "Darest thou not venture our person with one traitor?" "It is in vain you frown and stamp, my lord," said De Vaux. "I venture not a sick man with a sound one, a naked man with one armed in proof." "It matters not," said the Scottish knight. "I seek no excuse to put off time. I will speak in presence of the Lord of Gilsland. He is a good lord and true." "But half an hour since," said De Vaux, with a groan implying a mixture of sorrow and vexation, "and I had said as much for thee." "There is treason around you, King of England," continued Sir Kenneth. "It may well be as thou sayest," replied Richard. "I have a pregnant example." "Treason that will injure thee more deeply than the loss of 100 banners in a pitched field. The Sir Kenneth hesitated, and at length continued, in a lower tone, "the Lady Edith." "Ha!" said the king, drawing himself suddenly into a state of haughty attention, and fixing his eyes firmly on the supposed criminal. "What of her? What of her? What has she to do with this matter?" "My lord," said the Scot, "there is a scheme on foot to disgrace your royal lineage, by bestowing the hand of the Lady Edith on the Saracen Soldan, and thereby to purchase a peace most dishonourable to Christendom, by an alliance most shameful to England." The communication had precisely the contrary effect from that which Sir Kenneth expected. Richard Plantagenet was one of those who, in Iago's words, would not serve God because it was the devil who bade him. Advice or information often affected him less according to its real import than through the tinge which it took from the supposed character and views by those whom it was communicated. Unfortunately, the mention of his relative's name renewed his recollection of what he had considered as extreme presumption in the Knight of the Leopard, even when he stood high in the roll of chivalry, but which, in his present condition, appeared an insult sufficient to drive the fiery monarch into a frenzy of passion. "Silence!" he said. "Infamous and audacious! By heaven, I will have thy tongue torn out with hot pincers for mentioning the very name of a noble Christian damsel. Know, degenerate traitor, that I was already aware to what height thou hast dared to raise thine eyes, and endured it, though it were insolence, even when thou hadst cheated us, for thou art all a deceit, into holding thee as of some name and fame. But now, with lips blistered with the confession of thine own dishonour, that thou shouldst now dare to name our noble kinswoman as one in whose fate thou hast part or interest! What is it to thee if she marry Saracen or Christian? What is it to thee if, in a camp where princes turn cowards by day and robbers by night, where brave knights turn to paltry deserters and traitors, what is it, I say, to thee, or any one, if I should please to ally myself to truth and to valour in the presence of Saladin?" "Little to me, indeed, to whom all the world will soon be as nothing," answered Sir Kenneth boldly. "But were I now stretched on the rack, I would tell thee that what I have said is much to thine own conscience and thine own fame. I tell thee, Sir King, that if thou dost but in thought entertain the purpose of wedding thy kinswoman, the Lady Edith—" "Name her not, and for an instant think not of her," said the King, again straining the curtal axe in his grip, until the muscles started above his brawny arm, like the cordage formed by the ivy around the limb of an oak. "Not to name her, not to think of her?" answered Sir Kenneth, his spirits, stunned as they were by self-depression, beginning to recover their elasticity from this species of controversy. "Now, by the cross, on which I place my hope, her name shall be the last word in my mouth, her image the last thought on my mind. Try thy boasted strength on this bare brow, and see if thou canst prevent my purpose." "He will drive me mad," said Richard, who, in his despite, was once more staggered in his purpose by the dauntless determination of the criminal. Ere Thomas of Gilsland could reply, some bustle was heard without, and the arrival of the Queen was announced from the outer part of the pavilion. Detain her, Neville!" cried the King. "This is no sight for a woman. Fie, that I have suffered such a paltry traitor to chafe me thus! Away with him, De Vaux," he whispered, "through the back entrance of our tent. Coop him up close, and answer for his safe custody with your life. And hark ye, he is presently to die. Let him have a ghostly father. We would not kill soul and body. And stay, hark thee, we will not have him dishonoured. He shall die knight-like, in his belt and spurs. For if his treachery be as black as hell, his boldness may match that of the devil himself." De Vaux, right glad, if the truth may be guessed, that the scene ended without Richard's descending into the unkingly act of himself slaying an unresisting prisoner, made haste to remove Sir Kenneth by a private issue to a separate tent, where he was disarmed and put in fetters for security. De Vaux looked on with a steady and melancholy attention, while the provost officers, to whom Sir Kenneth was now committed, took these severe precautions. When they were ended, he said solemnly to the unhappy criminal, "It is King Richard's pleasure that you die undegraded, without mutilation of your body or shame to your arms, and that your head be severed from the trunk by the sword of the executioner." "It is kind," said the knight, in a low and rather submissive tone of voice, as one who received an unexpected favour. "My family will not then hear the worst of the tale. Oh, my father, my father!" This muttered invocation did not escape the blunt but kindly natured Englishman, and he brushed the back of his large hand over his rough features ere he could proceed. "It is Richard of England's further pleasure," he said at length, "that you have speech with a holy man, and I have met on the passage hither with a Carmelite friar, who may fit you for your passage. He waits without, until you are in frame of mind to receive him." "Let it be instantly," said the knight. "In this also Richard is kind. I cannot be more fit to see the good father at any time than now, for life and I have taken farewell, as two travellers who have arrived at the crossway where their roads separate." "It is well," said De Vaux slowly and solemnly, "for it irks me somewhat to say that which sums my message. It is King Richard's pleasure that you prepare for instant death." "God's pleasure and the King's be done," replied the knight patiently. "I neither contest the justice of the sentence, nor desire delay of the execution." De Vaux began to leave the tent, but very slowly paused at the door and looked back at the Scot, for whose aspect thoughts of the world seemed banished, as if he was composing himself into deep devotion. The feelings of the stout English baron were in general none of the most acute, and yet, on the present occasion, his sympathy overpowered him in an unusual manner. He came hastily back to the bundle of reeds on which the captive lay, took one of his fettered hands, and said, with as much softness as his rough voice was capable of expressing, "Sir Kenneth, thou art yet young, thou hast a father. My Ralph, whom I left training in his little galloway nag on the banks of the Irthing, may one day attain thy years, and, but for last night, would to God I saw his youth bear such promise as thine. Can nothing be said or done in thy behalf?" "Nothing," was the melancholy answer. "I have deserted my charge. The banner entrusted to me is lost. When the headsman and block are prepared, the head and trunk are ready to part company."